Well, hey everybody, and welcome to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian, and joining me today is Dylan Dodson.
What's up?
And today we're talking about why you should be putting out less chairs than you'll actually need for your service.
So this sounds completely counterintuitive.
Weird.
So we're going to talk about why first and then how second. So why should you put out less chairs than you need? What do we mean by that? We mean by you should actually put out less chairs in your auditorium, wherever you're meeting, than you expect for people to show up. So if you're a new church and you expect 50 people to show up or to be in the auditorium service, whatever, you should put 45 chairs down or 40 chairs down.
Right.
We originally got this idea, again, all of our ideas are from other people who are smarter than wiser than us.
Yep.
And when we heard it, I was like, this sounds amazing. Let's try it. And it has been awesome. So what we do is we put out less chairs than we need. Now, here's why. There's a couple reasons why. It creates momentum. So if you put out less chairs than you need, what does that mean? That means you have to drop chairs as the service starts, as people come in. Because it creates momentum and excitement. Not that we're trying to artificially make commitment or excitement or whatever, but you want people to be glad that they're here. You want people to be excitement. And so when you don't have enough seats, it creates like, oh, something's actually happening here. So it creates momentum. It also, here's a big one, makes people sit together.
Yes.
Instead of the awkward, can you please slide? You might still have to do that even if you do this method. But you actually have to sit next to each other because there's no seats. Instead of the one every other seat, it's like, oh, there's only so many seats. There's obviously less seats than we have here. Then we actually have to sit together. Here's another reason. Number 3 is that it makes people sit up front.
It's a big one.
No one ever likes to sit up front. Now, they might not sit on the front row because no matter how far back your front row is, no one ever wants to sit on the front row unless you beg them. But the second, third row, I guarantee you will be filled up because there's nowhere else to sit. Here is the 4th reason, because no one likes to stand. Now, if you're a new church, maybe you don't have this problem, but you might eventually, and if you don't have a big space, you might. Who loves a standing up only crowd, Brian?
The speaker?
Yes, the people on the stage. Who doesn't like to have to stand?
Anybody else?
Anybody else. And so when you don't have enough, when you put out chairs after the fact, what you're doing is you're forcing people to sit together, forcing people to sit up front so that you actually have seats available as people are still coming in. Instead of like the every other and everyone's like nobody wants to move. Well, everyone had to sit with each other. And so now that you have more room for more chairs because you picked them up, you actually have chairs. People don't have to just stand. There's going to be open seats available.
Yep.
Here is the last reason. We'll talk about this a little bit more, and then we'll talk about how. The 5th reason is this. Roping off and saving seats looks bad, especially to new guests. Even if it's for the best intentions, you've got volunteers coming in later in the service, or you need the band somewhere to sit, so you might rope off somewhere. You might put. We did both of this for a while. We roped off and we did the thing on the seat that said reserve, but it doesn't look nice. And when you're a new person, especially if you don't understand church, like you don't get why are they saving their seats? Why am I not able to save those seats? Are they for important people? What does it take to be important? How do I get my seat saved? Again, if you go to church, if you're a church person, you don't think this way. But a new person, man, they're questioning, especially if they don't know Jesus. They don't understand how anything works, and it just doesn't look good to rope off seats. And you have to do that if you have all your seats out.
Yep. So before we get to the how,
yes.
I actually have a question for you. So a lot of things that we've heard in the past are things like if a church feels, like it's more than 80% full, say, then people aren't going to want to come back because they'll feel too full.
Right.
So obviously this is saying it's going to be full.
Yes.
So how would you respond to that? What do you think?
Yeah. So first of all, well, not first of all. So I would just say that's true. However, at the end of the service, when you look around and you actually see there's more chairs out, and they could have put up more chairs out. Again, I won't get into the how just yet, but you're not actually out of seats.
Right.
So it's one thing like you're literally out of seats. People have to stand. They're like, oh, there's no more room. It's another thing where, oh, there's actually a couple of rows of chairs as people came in, because that's the big thing too, is the people that are coming in later and they don't have a seat, they're the ones that are going to feel like there's no room for me here.
Yep.
But if there's chairs being dropped, they're not going to feel like there's no room for me here because there's actually room for them. So, yeah, I would say I don't think it really hurts it that much because you're not actually out of seats. You just add more.
Yep. And just to comment on that myself, I don't want to say that that's, that thought process is never the case by any means, but I do think that as churches and church leaders, we have that thought process more than people actually do. Mm-hmm. I think people would rather sit in a more full space that has high energy and that is frankly more fun than somewhere where they have a lot of different seating options, but it feels like they're not connecting with anybody and they're kind of on their own.
Right. And we've all been there, right? Like the size of a crowd doesn't really matter so much. It's the size of how big the place is.
Sure.
So when you have like, maybe if you're in a school or somewhere else and you've got like some people sit in the first 2 rows and then there's 5 rows back, there's someone else. And there's something like when people are spread out, it's just dead. There's no energy. There's no excitement. People don't laugh. Like it's just like, it feels boring.
Right.
But when people are together, and if they have no choice but to be together, it creates way more energy.
Yep.
And so that's what we would recommend, why you should drop chairs, why you should have less. Now, how does this work? Okay, so how does this work? Again, what we've said a couple of times, have less chairs down than you expect to be there. So if you think you're going to have 50 people in your auditorium, put 40, 45 chairs down. Now, for us, we started doing this, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
It's been awesome, by the way. But the way our auditorium is laid out, we actually put just about the same amount of things we expect, and most every week we add a row or two. But that way, you know you have to do it. It's not like, I wonder if we're going to do this or not. It's like we've got chairs in the back of our auditorium. They're stacked up. So don't put like 10 chairs out if you're expecting 50 people, because that would take forever. Right. But put out about a little bit less than you expect, so that you know that every week you're going to be dropping chairs. That's one way how it works. Here also how it works is you need to have a plan of how and when you're going to do this.
Yep.
So not everybody can grab a chair. Not everybody can grab a chair when they want. So at us, we have a volunteer or serving position that we call our auditorium greeter that stands where the door is. People come in. So they're the ones that makes the call. No one else makes the call. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that go and grabs the chair. They put an entire row out whenever they grab a chair down. But we have people designated where they have to sit, who can take the chairs down. So it's not just willy-nilly, or else that defeats the whole purpose. Yep. So only one person. You have to have a plan of where and when.
And let me say, just add to that person, whether it's one person or if you have a large auditorium, might need to be a small team, but need to be on top of things and make sure they're monitoring and know what they're doing, because I think the worst thing that could happen in this scenario of dropping chairs is someone walk in and think they have to go get their own chair and go get a chair and put it down themselves.
Yeah. So again, and that's like, for like in our case, as soon as it's full, like it's okay if there's a few seats here or there.
Yeah. But
as soon as it's like, okay, very full, we're going to need to row, they need to be proactive, because it's nothing worse than having to stand and seeing that there's chairs that could have been put out. So you got to be proactive about it.
Yeah, and it's awkward for a new person to stand there and waiting while someone's getting them a chair. Yeah. It's just, especially if they're brand new, they're going to feel really uncomfortable. So they need to just make sure someone is on top of things.
Now it's different if they're walking in and someone's already putting out chairs, whatever. Yep. That's completely different than standing here. Obviously, the chairs need to be dropped and nobody's doing it. Yep. So you got to make sure you're proactive. Also, this is what we did. It was really helpful. You need to explain it to your people. I think so often as church leaders, we come up, we think, we dream, and so we're thinking about this all the time, and then we just do it, and then our people are like, what? This is very counterintuitive. Why are you not putting all the chairs out, right? So you need to explain to people, and this gives a great way for you to give mission and vision.
Yep.
So we told our key people that serve, people on our team, especially our people that are serving and volunteering, all that sort of thing, why we're doing this. We're doing this because we want to create momentum. We want to make it exciting. We want people to sit next to each other. We want people to when people are singing, to actually be able to hear everybody singing. All these things happen when you drop chairs, because you force people to sit next to each other. And so just explaining why we want to create this environment. And also in our space, our auditorium is not very big.
Right. And
if you're dropping chairs, your auditorium may not be very big either. So we could run out of space well before we actually are out of space. So just the practical of that. But also being able to give the mission of like, we want to make this a place that's fun and memorable. And it doesn't happen when there's 5 seats in between everyone sitting there.
Yep.
So it gives you an opportunity. So definitely explain it to your people. And also say this, you might be listening and be like, that sounds great. Maybe I should try dropping chairs. I get it. It looks like there's momentum. It looks like there's something happening. But we're meeting in a school, or we have our own space, and we do not have the ability to drop chairs because they're already there. Yeah. Brian, what would you say to someone in that situation?
I think you kind of have to work with what you got. Obviously, this, if you're in an auditorium where seats are built in or something like that, you can't, the luxury of just moving things around. But you got to work with what you got. It might be the case of roping things off, even though we did say that's kind of, we're not a huge fan of it. If that's the only option, that's the only option. I'd rather do that than not do anything. Yeah. It could be having something to block off the rows or just something along those lines so that people know not to sit there, and then you can start moving them back as more people show.
And the thing about this is it has to be done in an attractive way.
Yeah.
Especially, I think it's one thing if you're meeting in a school and people get it's not your space, there's only so much you can do. But if you have your own space and you have chairs that can't be moved, you can't just throw a rope on it. That looks bad. Maybe use a stanchion, something attractive, something that doesn't look ugly. And again, having people that are monitoring it and pulling it back row by row. Yep. It's hard to say without seeing your specific space what you should do. But if you can't move the chairs because they're permanent, we would still recommend somehow, some way, getting people to sit together, and then have a way to move the chairs back. Because again, having them sit together, people are laughing, people are talking, people are singing. It's just way different. Again, we did this about 3 or 4 months ago when we made this switch, and we would never go back.
No, it's totally noticeable that there's a difference both from the stage and from the crowd. Sitting with everybody, it feels so much different than before, and when you're up there preaching, it feels so much different than before. So it's just kind of great in every
Yeah,
scenario.
and like we never tell people. Again, if your size and stuff is bigger, not that you wouldn't, but we have yet to tell people that they need to move to the middle or they need to sit up front or whatever because it's like, oh, we don't have any seats. And I think it really helped that we explained it.
Yeah.
New people, they don't know any different. They're like, okay. But like if you have people that have been coming for a while, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we explained why. And so everyone is good with it. I have not heard, not that people don't complain, I have not heard a single person negatively complain that we do this.
Yep.
The first few weeks we heard some why, which is great. We got to explain why we're doing this. But not one person has been like, that's weird, because we explain it so they get it. Like, oh, that makes sense. This is exciting. And I think what people realize, the first few weeks, people are like, oh, I have to sit next to each other? I don't want to do that. But then once they do it, they're like, this is great. Like, I think
better.
you can actually hear people singing. Some people are like, I don't want you to hear me singing. Well, we're not talking about hearing individual people, but you can just like hear the crowd.
Yeah, you can hear them over
And
the speakers.
People laugh more. People are next to each other. You can tell people to elbow each, like, you can't do that when it's just boring and no one's next to each other. And so surprisingly, we've had no negative complaints other than the first few weeks, people that we didn't explain why. We're just like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. I would venture to say, though, if it's not explained and this is just something that you say you're going to do, that you will get negative comments because it is counterintuitive and it does involve more work from some people. So if you don't give them a reason, and whenever there's any, especially if you've already launched, whenever there's a change that's made, it's such a great time to be able to cast vision of why and what it's going to do rather than just saying we're doing this because it's going to build more energy.
Yep.
That means nothing. It's a great opportunity to bring people in on it.
And look, here's the thing. We're not trying to make fake energy here, but our mission at New City, like every church, is something about the Great Commission. Ours is to help people meet Jesus and grow in a relationship with him. Here's reality, especially in America and North America. The number one point of contact after online, which we've talked a lot about online stuff, so you should listen to those episodes, is a Sunday morning gathering or just a weekend service gathering. Unchurched people are going to do that before they go to a group, before they do anything. That's often their first port of contact. And so you want your Sunday morning gatherings and environments to be fun and energetic and not be boring and dull. And so a way to vision and mission to your people is say, hey, this helps us create an environment that's exciting and energetic and it's fun to be in, so that the unchurched person be like, oh, this is like, I thought church was supposed to be boring. So it's a part of, this really does, it may not sound like it, but this really does help accomplish our mission because it helps us create more energy on Sunday morning, which is most people's first point of contact. And it gets them to come back and hopefully get plugged in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hey, thanks for being with us. That's why you should consider dropping chairs. It's been great for us, and we would never go back as long as we have the ability to drop our chairs. And you might want to be considerate as well for you and for your services. And so, hey, thanks for being with us. As always, head to practicalplanting.com/questions. You can submit questions that you might want us to answer on future episodes. And until then, we'll see you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.